Greetings brothers, we get a lot of questions every week about where to get started, what models to buy first, how to get into Blood Angels, so today we're looking at building your first 1000 point Blood Angels list that's going to do really well in the tabletop and also set you up to expand your army further. So if you're new or you're just trying to build that first 1000 point list, then this video is going to be just for you. So I'm fired up to get into this 1000 point list, and if we're just meeting, I'm John, the Blood Angels Commander, and if you enjoy today's video or you get any value, I really appreciate it if you hit that like button, and if you're new here and you want to see regular Blood Angels content, then please consider subscribing. So this video is going to be broken into 6 sections and you can find them in the timeline down below. We're going to look at the detachment, a quick overview, strengths, weaknesses, strategies, and then some secondaries you can pick to get the most out of this army. So let's get straight into it and have a look at the army list itself. So let's talk about the list itself to begin with, and it does round in at 1000 points exactly, and you're going to have 4 CP if you copy this. Now, before the battle, I always like to spend a couple of CP, and this is why you're going to start on 4 rather than the full 6, and we're going to take a patrol detachment here. The 2 CP we're going to spend is 1 on Hero of the Chapter, 1 on Angel's Exemplar. Now if we start with our Warlord, we have a Captain on a bike, he's a Thunderhammer, Infernal Pistol, Gift of Foresight, which I think is arguably one of the most powerful Warlord traits in 9th edition. He's also going to use Angel's Exemplar to give him Adamantium Mantle, and he's also going to have the free relic Armor Indomitus, which is going to make him an absolute monster. Very difficult for the enemy to kill, and he can be or do just about anything you want him to do in the battlefield, and he's going to be very, very survivable. Our second HQ is going to be a Librarian with Jump Pack. He's going to have Null Zone, Psychic Fortress, also have an Infernal Pistol, and they're going to be armed with Iron Resolve, giving him 5 wounds and a 6+ Feel No Pain. So both of our characters have a good number of wounds and a Feel No Pain, which is going to help keep those HQ units alive, and they'll essentially be force multipliers. The Librarian can bring a lot to a battle, both at the beginning and at the end. For troops, we're going to have 1 squad of Primaris Infiltrators, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these other choices later in the video. For elites, we're going to have 5 Vanguard Veterans, 4 are going to have Storm Shields, all of them are going to have Lightning Claws, and the Sergeant, rather than the Storm Shield, he's going to have an Infernal Pistol. For our Sanguinary Guard, we're going to have 5 of them as well, 4 with Bolters, 1 with an Infernal Pistol, and then a combination of swords and axes. I think swords are slightly ahead right now, but sort of a mix between the two is the ideal option. For fast attack, we're going to have 3 attack pipes with multi-meltas. We're also going to have 3 inceptors with assault bolters, and then we're going to finish the list with a heavy support choice of the whirlwind with the castellan launcher. So that is going to come in at around about 1000 points exactly. So let's give the list a quick overview, and we already mentioned how survivable the captain was. He can also reroll 1 hit and 1 wound every turn. Remember, that's turn, not battle round, so you can do it in both your turn and the enemy's turn. Very, very strong. We also have our Psyker, who can basically protect allies with a Psychic Fortress, or you can remove enemies' invulnerable saves with the Null Zone, so both are pretty hugely valuable. Infiltrators are amazing at holding objectives, good at surviving, great at moving around the board with guerrilla tactics, and they can also perform actions pretty reliably as well because they are infantry, so a really good core choice in terms of the troops. When we did the tier list on troops just last week, infiltrators are the 1 troop choice that we put in the S tier, so we are ranking them higher than all other troop choices at the moment. Sanguinary Guard, arguably our most damaging unit. We've talked about the Sanguinary Guard a lot on this channel. They have massive damage output on turn 3. They can just destroy just about anything. Comboed if they're next to that really survivable Warlord, they're going to hit on 2s, they're going to reroll 1s. And they're so mobile as well. The fact that most of them are carrying those assault bolters means that if you need to assault and shoot, they essentially have like a 30-inch threat range. And in turn 2, if you don't manage to make a turn 2 charge, then the assault bolters are -2. So they're pretty good in turn 2 as well. We also have those Vanguard Veterans, which are great at shredding enemy infantry. They do not bad against armor as well because of the Lightning Claws, and I didn't know if you know this, but Blood Angels charging toughness 8 enemies, you'll actually wound 55% of the time on Lightning Claws. Lightning Claws, the rerolls with the Red Thirst is a great combination. So consider a 5-man squad of Vanguard Veterans I think they're a really core choice as well. I like them so much, even after they just did go up 10 points. Similar, actually, the Sanguinary Guard, this 5-man squad would have gone up 10 points as well with the chapter approved 2021 book. Moving on, we talk about attack bikes. And attack bikes went up in price as well, but we still think they're super strong. 14-inch move. The squad of 3 is going to get 12 bolter shots at 24 inches, 6 multi-melta shots at 24 inches. They can easily stay within 6 inches of the captain to get rerolls of 1s. They can also fall back and shoot, and they also find it very easy to get within half range of those multi-meltas to get the bonus damage due to their 14-inch move. No penalty for moving and shooting these guys either, so really, really strong attack bikes they still are. Inceptors with assault bolters, when they arrive from deep strike, you're going to get 18 shots at 18 inches, strength 5, and it's going to be -1 in. However, if you arrive in turn 2, which I kind of recommend, I guess, if you arrive in turn 2, you're going to get that -2 AP. So arriving near your captain in turn 2, potentially paying Descent of the Angels, you can essentially hit all 18 shots on 2s, re-rolling 1s. That gives you a 97% chance to hit. So you could probably... I actually didn't even have them arrive near the captain and hit 16 out of 18 shots just last week. So if the enemy has a bunch of lower strength units, lower toughness, sorry, or chaff units that you need to clear out, or just some infantry screens or bodyguards, then these guys can absolutely drop down and just make mincemeat of them. At 40 points a model, I kind of like the Inceptors. They can also arrive from deep strike, perform an action for 2 CP, and still shoot via one of the stratagems in the Space Marine book. So there's lots to like with the Inceptors. I think they're still a very, very strong unit. I believe we also put these in the S tier for our fast attack tier list, which I believe is coming out on the channel on Saturday night, so stay tuned for that. We also have the Whirlwind, and it can knock weaker enemies off objectives. It can clear out some hordes, but one of the main reasons to include the Whirlwind is suppression fire. I've done a lot of talking about suppression fire. In fact, I've done individual videos about just about everything in this list, and I'll link some of them throughout this video at the top of the screen. So if you're new, or if you just need a refresher on some of those other videos, then I will link them, because then, starting with your 4 CP, the stratagems that I've mentioned, suppression fire, guerrilla tactics, Descent of the Angels, hit and run warfare is the one where the attack bikes can fall back and shoot. So these are 4 stratagems, all nice and cheap on 1 CP, and you'll be able to use these to basically really buff and benefit this army greatly. So let's talk about strengths of this list. And we have a high, durable warlord, and a very strong melee threat, when we have a good amount of firepower to clear out any screens and make sure that our melee units can charge what they need to be charging. We also have utility from the Whirlwind and the Psyker, both pretty powerful in their respective situations. And then also we kind of have 2 objective holders, and the Infiltrators can deep strike, they can start in concealed positions, so they can start out with your deployment zone on an objective, potentially, if you feel it's safe. And the Whirlwind can also hold your backfield objective, or you can start them both sort of a bit more defensively, and then guerrilla tactics the Infiltrators up the board. But yeah, this gives you basically 2 objective holders, and because the Whirlwind has that indirect fire, you're not really losing all that much having the Whirlwind, 125 points. And if you use the Infiltrators right, and they perform actions, stuff like retrieve Octarius data, or they sit on objectives, then you're not really spending too many points. It's only like a quarter of your points to hold 2 objectives and get some actions done, which I think is very reasonable. Now, the list is also very mobile in that your Sanguinary Guard are moving a lot, same as the Vanguard Veterans, same as the attack bikes, the Inceptors, and both your HQs. So this is one of the most mobile lists, and on the smaller map sizes, for a 1,000-point game, this is going to help you get all around the board and do a lot of work with this army. And like I said, it's a really solid core. And this is the core, this core here, every unit in this list, pretty much in the exact squad size, except maybe the Sanguinary Guard, where I run in a squad of 8 in my 2,000-point list. This is basically exactly how I take them in the 2,000 points. So this is a great place to get started and build towards that 2,000-point army. And you also start with a very solid amount of command points. 4, I believe, is totally fine in a 1,000-point game, especially when you get 1 per turn, so you would have 9 over the course of the game. So like every list in 40k though, there is always going to be some weakness where you double down in some areas, you leave some weak spots. And one thing that I would say is this is quite an elite based list. And I know 2 of our units are fast attack, but they still feel like elite units. Like the attack bikes and the Inceptors, they're both toughness 5, they both do a lot of shooting, or a lot of damage, I guess would be a better way to put it. So they do sort of sit in like an elite slot, you know? So lack of obsec, you know, we don't have many troops, so we don't have objectives secured on anything except our infiltrators. So we have to make sure if we're playing this list, we're killing the enemy on the objectives, because we're not ever going to really obsec the objectives away from the enemies. So killing them on the objectives is important, and that's okay. I mean, this list will do that. It will 100% kill enemies, but it can be a slight weakness against certain enemy types, in that if they have a hugely obsec army, you're going to need to destroy every single last model of every single objective to flip those objectives to your side. Now, there's not too many units to perform actions here, so I guess like you really need to think of the infiltrators as... I've been trying to work out a strategy where my infiltrators now, on 3 of the 5 turns, are always available to do actions. So I would say use these guys very much like that. Infiltrators don't do a lot of damage. They deny deep strike, they protect your flanks or wherever you need to go, and they perform actions. And that's 100% how I would use them, because you're going to need potentially some of your 2 HQ choices or your other 2 elite units, or maybe the Inceptors to perform an action if you wanted to max some of the secondaries that need, let's say, 4 actions. So use your infiltrators primarily for actions, because otherwise the list is a little limited, and make sure you're deploying those infiltrators where they're not going to die early in the game, because if you lose them too early, you're going to have big problems, right? So they need to be in obscuring positions, and probably 6 inches away from one board quarter, so that they can perform some actions basically straight away at the start of the battle. And then the only other thing I would say that this list really has in weakness is there's no automatic way to get rerolls for charges. So you're only going to be able to command reroll your charges, and sometimes this isn't a big deal, but I guess you're going to need to use your movement very wisely. You know, you need to make sure that you're giving yourself doable charges, and I guess what I would say is a doable charge is 7 or 8 inches, meaning that you either need to roll a 6 or a 7 on 2d6. That's a pretty high probability charge. If you can set 2 or 3 of those up each turn, then you're unlikely to fail more than one of them, and then you have your 1 CP reroll. If you're setting up multiple 9-inch charges with no rerolls, then you're going to have problems. So that's where I would say the weakness is. But I think because everything is so mobile and you've got those jump packs, I think it's going to be up to you to make good plays or make good movement, so you don't need to worry about that. But I would say it is a perceived weakness. Now let's talk a little bit about strategy, and I mean, in terms of like actually seeing these lists in action. So I don't play 1,000 point games on this channel, but every Monday night we do play a 2,000 point game, and like I said, a lot of the units here, you know, they are 100% lifts from my 2,000 point lists, and I think this sets you up to build into like a really solid 2,000 point list. So I would say, you know, you could watch any of my games and you could probably skim and get some of the tactics that I'm using. I do also occasionally do abridged battle reports, where I take a battle report, because they normally like 4 or 5 hours, and I break them down into like a 30-minute segment. We talk about secondaries and stuff, and I'll link a playlist of battle reports that I've done up above, so if you want to check out some of the addendum battle reports to get some tactics a little bit quicker, you can do that too. Or come and hang out on Monday night. You know, on Monday night a lot of people are in the chat, a lot of people answer a lot of questions, and I think every week we learn a new ruling or something, because like we're trying to play at a pretty high competitive level with the Blood Angels, and we're trying to get wins. And I've actually got 2 tournaments coming up, September and November. So yeah, anyway, let's move on to strategy, which is going to be point number 5. So strategy, let's talk about the captain and the sanguinary guard. And I kind of want them to move from cover to cover in turn 1 and turn 2. So I never want them to be exposed. I mean, if they are exposed and they can be shot, then I mean that can happen. But trying to keep them to be shot by a minimum, and I want to dictate where they fight. And what I mean by that is I want to position them that the enemy cannot charge me, I do the charging. Unless, of course, I can suppression fire the enemy that's going to charge me, and then I get to fight first and it's not an issue. But if I cannot suppression fire the enemy, then I want to dictate the first charge, because you'll do a lot more damage on the charge, and potentially, if the enemy charges you with a really strong unit, you could lose a lot of these guys. So we have to dictate when and what gets charged, and we can do that just because the bike's going to move 14 inches and the Sanguinary Guard and the Vanguard Veterans are going to move 12. So I feel like we have enough movement there to dictate the charges, so we need to 100% try and do that. The Librarian can go with your squad of melee if you think that's important, and you can bring the Null Zone. The Null Zone synergizes really well with the Sanguinary Guard. They get no invulnerable saves, so if you want to remove enemies' invulnerable saves, this is good as well. Or the Librarian can start the game with the Attack Bikes or the Inceptors and cast Psychic Fortress, giving them that 5+ invulnerable save. And I think it actually gives a lot of value to the Attack Bikes, because people see the Attack Bikes as a big threat. The multi-meltas that they have obviously can do a lot of damage. It's 6 multi-meltas, and they can easily zoom in within half range. So giving them Psychic Fortress can actually be a very valuable play. It's so much easier to save on 5s than it is on 6s. I showed that again this week, where we had to roll 6 saves on Librarian at 5+, and we made all of them against multi-meltas. So yeah, I would say Psychic Fortress definitely has quite a lot of value. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes you fail them all, but sometimes it can bring great value. So that's one way to think of the Librarian. We talked about using the Whirlwind in the backfield, and choose your targets perfectly. If you think the enemy is going to charge you with some unit that's going to do a lot of damage to you, 100% suppression fire it, so you get to fight against it first. You can also use this very strategically to just basically tell the enemy, like, hey, you can't charge me, because sometimes if you suppression fire a model, they just won't charge you because they're too scared of the retaliation from the Sanguinary Guard or the captain or whatever. But if there's no threats for charging, then use it to pick enemies off objectives, pick off enemies doing actions. It doesn't have great AP, the Whirlwind, it's AP 0, but you do get a decent amount of shots. It is blast as well, so try and hit things that aren't in cover, that aren't going to get like a really easy save against it, and do what you can with the Whirlwind. It's not a damage dealer, but it can be used to do damage if the opportunity arrives. I think the Vanguard Vets and the Inceptors can choose here. They can start on the board, or they can start in Deep Strike, probably map dependent and also dependent on what your enemy has, and again, make sure the engagements are on your terms. And again, I think one of these two squads has to perform an action if you're going to take something like Octarius Data, because the Infiltrators are reliably only going to be able to score it, let's say, 3 times. If you think about it, in turn 1, the Infiltrators are in one board quadrant. They need 2 turns to move across to another board quadrant and cast it, so they can do it in the 3rd turn. In turn 4, you can guerrilla tactics them. In turn 5, you can bring them down another board quadrant. So potentially, if you're doing Octarius Data with one squad of Infiltrators, you can guarantee that that one squad can do it in 3 board quadrants. So you need to do it in one other board quadrant to get the maximum 12 points. I failed on this week at this battle report, and I will not fail on it again. And after that, that's when I wrote all this down. So you need one of your other 2 squads 100% to perform the action, I think, and they can only do it in turn 2 and 4 here, right? Because this is when the Infiltrators will be moving. So you need to position either the Vanguard Vets or Inceptors to be able to do that action in turn 2 and 4 if you want to maximize your points from Octarius Data. So keep that in mind, and I think that'll help you as well. And then I think at the start of the game, your Attack Bikes, they should be deployed in an obscuring position. They aren't that survivable. They're a great 14-inch move, can let them get out of that obscuring position fairly easily and shoot whatever they need to shoot. If you think about it, 14 inches plus the 24 inches for the multi-meltas, that's a 38-inch threat range. So use them wisely, deploy them where they're not going to get shot in turn 1, and then get them out there, get them near the captain, and do some serious damage with them. So finally, let's talk about some secondaries that are going to work well with this list. So Oath of Moment is always a secondary that I very much consider. Oath of Moment, you kind of just need to have something in the middle of the board. If there's an objective in the middle of the board and you're going to need to be there, your Vanguard Veterans could hold it. They could be backed up by the Inceptors. Your Captain could be there. Probably a good... Oath of Moment is always, seems to me, like an 8 to 10 reliable VP every game, or even more. So consider Oath of Moment. It is a Space Marine specific secondary. Relentless Assault / behind enemy lines, depending on deployment zones. Relentless Assault can be very easy to score if you know you're not up against an army or an enemy that has a lot of deep strike units. and or none. So keep those in mind. You do have 2 units that I recommend deep striking, or saying that they can deep strike, so potentially easy points to be scored with Relentless Assault if used right. Assassinate and Bring Them Down are situational based on what the enemy has in their list. If they have more than 2 characters, I would say, and 1,000 points, then, so if they have 3 characters or more, I would be definitely thinking about Assassinate. And then when we get to 2,000 points, if they have 5 characters, 100% Assassinate is for me. And obviously against a vehicle heavy list, Bring It Down can be quite interesting. And then also raise the banners / recover Octarius data. We mentioned how our infiltrators could potentially do actions. Some of our other more elite choice units could do an action or 2 as well. And I guess banners could work depending on the number of objectives, and I've already talked about how you could do recover Octarius data. And while there could be some other secondaries that could be situationally good, I don't spend too much time playing 1,000 point games myself, but I have done multiple videos on secondaries and when to pick them, so I will link one of those videos up above as well, and if you want to see a bit more about secondaries, then you can check that out there. So thank you very much for staying to the end of the video. I hope that gave you some ideas on where to get started, what to build, what to buy. Obviously this channel is 100% focused on Blood Angels, so there's tons more content on here, and you can check those videos out right now. If you enjoyed this video, or you feel like you got some value from it, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. YouTube will only show my videos to other people if we get so many likes, so just every like is so much appreciated, so thank you for that. Obviously if you want to see more, you can consider subscribing. In the video description below we have both a Facebook group and a Discord, and you can come and you can hang out with the rest of us or join one of our live streams. They go on Mondays, Sundays, and usually Thursdays and Saturdays. So we're live like 4 times a week. So if you want to hang out with, I guess 6,000 now, we have 6,000 other Blood Angels players in this community. I mean, please do so, and hopefully we'll catch you in the Discord. Thank you ever so much for watching. I really hope to see you in the next video. Did you see my new Blood Angel? He finally came. We're going to be unboxing this guy on the channel pretty soon. And I think we're going to be repainting him actually. I mean, he's kind of cool as is, but he's very flat. So, you know, more videos to come. And Saturday night this week, when I normally live stream, I'm out of town Saturday night. So rather than live stream, we're going to put the second video of the tier list out on Saturday night, and it's going to be fast attack, and it's going to be kind of like an hour and a half long because there's a shitload of fast attack to get through. So please, if you normally hang out on Saturday night, the option will be there to hang out with all the community members, and you know, Mark and Tony will likely be there, and they are in this week's video again explaining a lot of stuff about fast attack. So hopefully see you in the next video. Thank you again for watching. By the blood are we made, my brothers. Peace.